All right, welcome back. So, when we're using this information, it asks us what is the percentage that we're going to use to simulate. So you always use the larger sample size for your percentage to simulate. So you use the larger sample size. And it's because that law of large numbers that we talked about a couple lessons ago. So the larger the sample size, the bigger the sample, the closer and closer and closer you get to the actual true ability. So if we want to simulate their ability, we want to see if a certain performance is strange or if it's clutch, whatever like that. So we're going to use the larger sample size, which is actually his regular playoffs. Regular playoffs, sorry. This is regular season. So that percentage was 13.8%. So when we're simulating, the percentage we use is the larger sample size. Okay? And we want to know, so we think that his ability is roughly 13.8%. Okay? Here's the tricky part. When we start to assign numbers, because what we're trying to do ultimately is we're trying to assign numbers into a category. From that category, we're going to simulate a bunch of numbers, and those numbers are going to tell us how many shots he had in the playoff and if that 15 out of 79 was considered a clutch or not. So we're using the larger sample size to assign numbers, and then when it says do I use 100 or do I use 1,000 numbers, if it's a whole number, you use 100. If it's a decimal, you use 1,000. Okay, so we're going to use 1,000 because we have 13.8%. So what numbers represent making a goal? I'm going to assign a category to represent making a goal. So if he made a goal 13.8% of the time in the regular season, that means numbers 1 to 138 are going to represent making a goal. And we have to assign the other side of it. So just like when we made the bar graph, I'm going to go back real quickly to that, how we had the purple bar represented the percentages that he missed, and how the red one represented the percentages that he made. I have to make sure that I represent missed and made when I'm simulating. So what numbers represent missing a goal would be the remaining, 139 to 1,000. So the reason that we use 1,000 versus 100 is because random integer on a calculator cannot actually simulate decimals. You can only simulate whole numbers. So we have to account for that decimal in order to simulate the numbers. So basically what we're trying to do is we're going to simulate and see how many numbers fall between 1 and 138, because that's a made goal. And ultimately what we're looking for is how many out of the 79 that we simulate is 15 coming up again. So does 15 come up again, or did that not, was it random? Okay, so in a calculator, you're going to use random integer. And there is a video that shows you how to use random integer, but essentially on the calculator, there's a function under the math probability. And what it does is it simulates random number within a list. So on a quiz or a test, I'd want to see you write this out, that this is how you're going to simulate it. So I'm starting at 1. That's your starting number. So that means any number that starts from 1. Your ending number is 1,000. So that's your ending number. So I can simulate any number between 1 and 1,000. Now this space right here represents how many numbers you're going to simulate. So how many numbers that you're going to simulate. Again, these are the directions for the calculator if you have your TI-84. Okay. So when we go back to figure out how many numbers that we simulate, we talk about his unusual performance. So whether that's a good unusual performance. So that whether that was a good unusual performance or bad unusual performance, he had 15 out of 79. And we want to see, was this scenario, so was he clutch, did his ability increase from that scenario of the playoffs? So that means that I want to simulate 79 numbers, and I want to see out of those 79 numbers how many fall between 1 and 138. So kind of confusing. So we use his larger performance to say what we're going to try, how we're going to assign numbers, and then we use his smaller performance that was unusual to simulate the amount of numbers that we're going to have. Okie dokie. So we can use technology. Essentially, if you click this link on the PowerPoint, that's going to bring you to some simulation where it's going to show you. And what happens when you plug that into the calculator is you're going to get a long list of numbers. It could be like 1, 74, 389, 217, all the way up until 79 numbers. And you're going to circle each number that falls between 1 and 138 to see how many times he made a shot in that list. So numbers between 1 and 138 is a made. Numbers between 139 to 1,000 is a miss. So here he missed, here he missed. And I'm counting so that I have a table and a dot plot where I can see how many out of 79 he made. So, all right, so in general, okay, this is the 5 things that you would write on a quiz or a test. You assign your numbers first. So you're going to say let 1 to 138 represent a make. That's a made shot. So again, larger sample size is how you assign numbers. I'm going to write that down here. Larger sample size is how you assign numbers. Okay, so that means 139 to 1,000 represents a miss. Okay, in your calculator, you're representing 1 to 1,000 and the number of simulated numbers, so the number of simulations, is based on the unusual performance. So we had 79 because I'm trying to see where was that 15 out of 79, was that unusual or not? You're going to count how many numbers fall between 1 and 138. You want to see how many numbers he made, how many shots he made, and you record on a dot plot and repeat many times. And you just need to write that verbatim, that last step. So this is kind of what I would want to see on a quiz or a test. Okie dokie. All right, so you see 1 to 100. 1 to 100 is a whole number. A decimal is 1 to 1,000. You must say 1 to something represents something. 1 to the other number to 1,000 or 100 represents something else. Make sure you tell me what you're going to put in your calculator. Okay, so here is the tough part we're going to talk about in the next one. So I'm going to stop this video here, take a break, take a breather, and we're going to come back and really talk about what we're trying to achieve.